The jungle was alive with a symphony of whispers. Leaves rustled as if sharing secrets, and the distant call of exotic birds echoed like an exotic melody through the thick, humid air. Sweat clung to her skin as she pushed through the dense undergrowth, her boots sinking into the soft, damp earth with every step. Lara's heart thumped in time with the rhythm of the jungle. She had never felt this raw, this alive. The ruins loomed ahead, half swallowed by creeping vines and towering trees. Stone steps, slick with moss, led to a platform where intricate carvings told stories of forgotten gods and ancient rituals. Every step Lara took was a step deeper into mystery and danger. She wasn't alone. Behind her, he moved silently, muscles coiled like a predator, his dark eyes scanning the foliage. Marco was the kind of man who seemed to exist both in shadow and sunlight at once. His presence made the air between them charged, electric, a silent promise neither wanted to acknowledge. The humidity clung to them both, sticking their shirts to their skin, revealing contours, hints of tension. Every glance they shared lingered too long, each brush of a hand against a branch making her pulse quicken. "Careful," Marco murmured, his voice low, almost a growl, as if the jungle itself had gifted him that sound. "These ruins, they're ancient. One wrong move and I can handle myself," Lara said, though her voice betrayed a flicker of heat that had nothing to do with the tropical sun. He chuckled, a sound that vibrated through the thick air, teasing, intimate. She felt it in her chest, in her belly. It was ridiculous, impossible, even, but the jungle had a way of magnifying every sensation. The scent of damp earth mixed with her own perspiration and something else, something wild and thrilling, as if the jungle approved of their closeness. They reached the base of a crumbling staircase. Moss-covered stones glinted like jewels in the shafts of sunlight breaking through the canopy. Marco's hand brushed hers as he helped her up a particularly slick step. The touch was fleeting, almost casual, but it made her skin tingle, igniting a slow, simmering heat that had nothing to do with the sun above. "This place," Lara whispered, eyes tracing the carvings that had survived centuries. Figures intertwined in ways that seemed almost suggestive. She shivered. "There's a story here. Something forbidden." Marco leaned closer, his breath brushing the side of her neck. "Some stories are better discovered in person," he murmured, his words sending a shiver down her spine that wasn't from fear. His fingers grazed her arm, deliberate, teasing, as though testing boundaries that neither of them had the courage or the will to define. The jungle seemed to close in around them. Every sound was amplified, the drip of water from broken stones, the creak of old wood, the distant roar of a waterfall hidden beyond the foliage. Yet amid the cacophony, all Lara could focus on was Marco. His proximity made her pulse race, a silent, urgent drumbeat she couldn't ignore. They reached the top of the platform, the ruins unfolding around them in a breathtaking panorama of stone and shadow. The sun pierced through the canopy, illuminating hidden alcoves where vines coiled like serpents, and she felt the thrill of discovery and something more. The heat between them was nearly tangible, a physical force pressing them closer than the confines of the jungle demanded. "Look at this," Marco said, tracing the lines of a carving that depicted a couple entwined, lost in a timeless embrace. His fingers brushed hers again, and this time, neither pulled away. The contact was incendiary, sparking a slow burn that neither wanted to douse. Lara's breath hitched. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of the jungle and something else, something dangerous and forbidden. Their eyes met, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. The ruins, the jungle, the heat, it all conspired to strip away every pretense, every caution. And somewhere deep in the shadows of the ancient stones, the past seemed to whisper, some flames, once ignited, could not be extinguished. The heat was suffocating, thick enough to press against their skin, and the ruins seemed to pulse with it, as if alive, aware of their presence. Lara stepped cautiously along a narrow ledge, her fingers brushing the carved stone for balance. Moss clung to the cracks like a stubborn memory of rain, and the faint trickle of water echoed from somewhere deep within the ruins, a whisper of hidden streams and secret chambers. Marco was close behind her, always just a fraction of a step away, his shadow merging with hers. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, a warmth that was impossible to ignore, mingling with the sticky humidity that clung to their clothes. Every glance, every accidental brush of skin, sent a shiver up her spine. She was acutely aware of him, aware of the way his gaze lingered, dark and intense, as if reading her thoughts before she even formed them. They reached a half-collapsed archway that led into what seemed like the heart of the ruins. The air inside was cooler but carried an earthy, almost metallic scent that made her nostrils flare. Stone statues of forgotten deities lined the walls, their expressions frozen in eternal secrecy. Some seemed to watch them, eyes hollow but unervingly alive. "Do you feel that?" Lara whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It's like the place is waiting for something. Or someone." Marco's lips curved into a half smile, half smirk, but his eyes never left hers. "Maybe it's waiting for us," he murmured, voice low, teasing, sending a shiver that had nothing to do with the damp chill. The floor was uneven, and as Lara stepped carefully over a cracked slab, her ankle twisted slightly. Marco reacted instantly, his hand steadying her. The contact was brief but electric, and Lara felt her breath catch. There was a pulse to the jungle, a rhythm that matched the rising heat between them. "You've got to be more careful," he said, his tone softening, almost intimate. "These ruins, they don't forgive mistakes." "I can handle myself," she replied, though the admission sounded weaker than she intended. Her pulse raced, not from fear alone, but from the heat of proximity, the closeness of him, the faint brush of his hand against hers as he guided her forward. Deeper inside, the ruins opened into a chamber, the walls covered with intricate murals depicting scenes of passion, devotion, and ritual. Figures entwined in ways that seemed both sacred and forbidden, their expressions rapturous, almost knowing. Lara's eyes roamed over the artistry, tracing the lines with fascination and a hint of something more primal stirring within her. Marco stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. The scent of him, sweat, earth, and something uniquely his own filled the air around her. She could feel the heat of his body pressing against hers, and the faint brush of his fingers as he adjusted the strap of her pack felt like a deliberate, teasing touch. "Some things are meant to be experienced, not just seen," he murmured, voice low, warm, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cool stone beneath her feet. Lara's heart thudded, a mixture of anticipation and something else, something daring, dangerous, magnetic. The air between them crackled, charged, alive with unspoken tension. She wanted to step back, to regain control, but a deep, almost instinctual part of her urged her forward, toward him, toward the heat that seemed to draw them together like gravity. The ruins themselves seemed to respond. A faint breeze stirred, rustling the vines that crept along the stone walls, sending the scent of damp earth and wild flowers into the chamber. The shadows shifted, flickering like flames, casting the carvings in a new, more intimate light. The jungle outside hummed, almost approvingly, as if complicit in the unspoken promise simmering between them. Marco's hand found hers again, his fingers brushing against hers deliberately, slowly. She didn't pull away. The contact sent an electric thrill coursing through her, igniting a fire that neither of them had the courage or the desire to extinguish. "Lara," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. The word alone made her knees weak, her skin sensitive to every inch of his proximity. She could feel the heat building, a tension that was almost unbearable, like standing on the edge of a precipice with the wind tugging at her balance. They moved deeper into the chamber, the shadows lengthening as sunlight struggled through the dense canopy above. The murals seemed to follow their movement, depicting forbidden desires frozen in time. Lara couldn't stop herself from tracing the lines of one particularly intricate scene with her fingertips, feeling the grooves in the stone as if connecting to the passion carved centuries ago. Marco leaned closer, and for a moment, the world beyond the ruins, beyond the jungle, beyond time itself disappeared. There was only heat, only tension, only the slow, simmering promise of something wild and unstoppable. Some flames, once stirred, could not be contained. The chamber grew warmer as they ventured deeper, the sun slipping behind thick foliage, allowing shafts of golden light to streak through the cracks in the walls. Lara could feel the heat of the day pressing in on her, mixing with the rising pulse between herself and Marco. Every step they took stirred the heavy scent of damp earth and wild vegetation, but there was another aroma, electric, intoxicating, that made her senses sharpen, her heartbeat thrum in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. Marco moved close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Every brush of his shoulder against hers, every slight touch of his fingers when he steadied her on uneven stones, was a silent, teasing message. Lara's breath caught more than once. She wanted to step back, to focus on the ruins and their mysteries, but the magnetic pull toward him was relentless. The corridor narrowed, forcing them almost shoulder to shoulder. The walls were carved with scenes that seemed to depict rituals of the past, figures entwined in embraces both reverent and raw. The details were startling in their intimacy, as if the ancient artisans had wanted to capture desire itself in stone. Lara's fingers brushed against a carved figure, and the grooves of the stone felt eerily lifelike under her touch. Marco's hand found hers again. This time, it lingered, fingers curling around hers, thumb brushing the back of her hand in slow, deliberate circles. She didn't pull away. The heat between them intensified, a slow burning fire fanned by proximity, by the jungle pressing in around them, by the impossible intimacy of the ruins. "We shouldn't," she started, but the words died on her lips. Marco's eyes darkened, his expression unreadable, magnetic. "Shouldn't what?" he murmured, his voice low, deliberate. His thumb grazed hers again, light, teasing, igniting a spark that made her knees weak. The corridor opened into a larger chamber, its ceiling high and partially collapsed. Sunlight poured in, illuminating walls etched with twisting vines and serpentine figures entwined in passion. Lara's eyes roamed over the stone, tracing the carvings, feeling an inexplicable shiver of recognition, as if the ruins themselves were alive, aware, watching. Marco stepped closer, the space between them narrowing. She could feel his breath, warm and steady, brushing against her cheek. "These ruins, they're dangerous," he said, though the words were meaningless. The warning didn't reach her, all she felt was the tension radiating from him, pressing against her own restrained desire. Her pulse thudded in her ears as Marco's hand brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. The contact was casual in appearance, but deliberate in effect. Every nerve in her body ignited, her skin alive under the slightest touch. She wanted to pull away, to regain control, but her body betrayed her. She leaned slightly closer, drawn to the heat that seemed to emanate from him like a flame in the darkness. A faint breeze rustled through the broken roof, stirring vines and leaves. The movement cast shifting shadows across the walls, giving life to the carved figures. Lara felt as if the past itself was observing, urging, coaxing them closer. She could almost hear whispers, ancient voices telling of passion, of secrets, of fire that could not be tamed. Marco's hand lingered, moving from hers to the small of her back as he guided her forward along the uneven stone floor. The chamber seemed endless, a labyrinth of carved history and forbidden desire. Her breath quickened, mingling with the humid air that clung to them both. They stopped before a circular stone dais, its center etched with a star-shaped pattern that radiated outward. Lara knelt, brushing her fingers over the carvings, tracing the grooves. Marco crouched beside her, close enough that the warmth of his body pressed against hers. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, and it resonated with her own rising pulse. "You're mesmerizing," he murmured, the words almost lost in the ambient sounds of the jungle, the drip of water, the distant call of some unknown bird, the rustle of unseen creatures. Lara felt her cheeks flush. The ruins, the heat, the isolation, it all made the tension unbearable, a coil winding tighter and tighter between them. Her fingers traced the carvings one last time before she looked up at him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the chamber fell away, leaving only them two people on the edge of a dangerous, irresistible fire. And then the ruins themselves seemed to respond. A faint tremor ran through the stone beneath them, small but noticeable, a subtle reminder that some flames, once stirred, could ignite in ways neither of them could control. Lara's breath hitched. Marco's hand was warm on her back. Their proximity, the heat, the tension, it was impossible to deny. Something was building, a promise of danger and desire intertwined, waiting to explode in the shadowed heart of the jungle ruins. The air inside the ruins had grown thick, almost suffocating, yet every inhale was a sharp reminder of life, of presence, of the simmering energy between them. Lara wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, though it did little to ease the damp stickiness of her clothes. Marco stayed close, his shadow melding with hers as they navigated a narrow stone walkway that led deeper into the heart of the ruins. Every step was precarious, some stones teetered on the brink of collapse, others slick with moss that threatened to betray her balance. Yet, despite the danger, despite the oppressive heat, Lara couldn't ignore the electricity in the space between them. Each brush of his arm, the subtle shift of his body as he mirrored her movements, made her pulse quicken. It was a tension that neither of them could fully name, and perhaps they didn't want to. There was a thrill in the unspoken, in the closeness that the jungle itself seemed to encourage. They reached a chamber unlike any they had seen before. The walls curved inward, forming a semicircular alcove filled with intricate carvings that depicted rituals of old sacred and sensuous intertwined. In the center lay a shallow basin, carved from stone, still holding dark, murky water. Tiny droplets dripped from the ceiling, plinking softly as they hit the surface, echoing in the vast silence. Marco leaned against the edge of the alcove, his dark eyes studying her. "This place," he murmured, voice low, almost reverent. "It feels alive." "Yes," Lara replied, her voice husky. "It's like it remembers everything, everyone who's been here. Like it's holding onto them, waiting." He stepped closer, the space between them narrowing to a fraction of an inch. The warmth radiating from his body pressed against hers, and she felt her pulse surge, a rapid drum beat that matched the humidity in the air. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world beyond the ruins ceased to exist. The slightest movement, his hand brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, was enough to ignite a spark that coursed through her. She wanted to look away, to regain some semblance of control, but her body betrayed her. Every nerve ending was alive, every instinct heightened by proximity, by heat, by the forbidden thrill that hummed in the air like a living thing. A distant roar of some jungle predator made her jump slightly, and Marco's hand steadied her on her arm. The touch was brief but charged, deliberate and intimate. Lara's breath caught, not from fear, but from the electric closeness of him. "You're shaking," he murmured, his lips dangerously close to her ear. "From the jungle, or from me?" Her pulse quickened at the question, and she had no answer, not a clear one. The ruins themselves seemed to hum with anticipation, the carvings casting shifting shadows that danced along their skin. Lara's fingers twitched, almost unconsciously, and her gaze fell to his, dark and unyielding, a mirror of her own rising desire. They moved toward the basin in the center, the stone cold beneath their fingertips, water rippling with each step. Marco crouched beside her, brushing his fingers over the water's surface, droplets splashing lightly. The movement was innocent, yet the proximity, the intimacy of shared space, sent a thrill through her body. The jungle outside pressed against the broken walls, the heat, the humidity, the constant rustle of leaves forming a soundtrack that seemed orchestrated just for them. Lara's senses were on fire: sight, sound, touch, the faint smell of the wet stone mixed with the earthiness of the jungle, and she realized how aware she was of Marco, of the way his presence dominated every corner of the space. He leaned closer, his hand brushing hers on the basin. The contact lingered, deliberate, teasing. Lara's breath hitched. She felt every inch of him without a word being spoken, a silent acknowledgement of something dangerous and irresistible stirring between them. A sudden tremor rattled the stone beneath their feet, making the basin ripple more violently. Lara instinctively clutched Marco's arm for balance, and their eyes met, both of them aware of the electricity in that touch. It was no longer just the ruins, no longer just the jungle, it was them. The heat, the danger, the tension, all converging into a single, unspoken truth: some desires, once awakened, could not be ignored. For a moment, they stayed like that, bodies close, breaths mingling, hearts racing. The ruins, ancient and knowing, held them in its embrace, echoing secrets of passion and fire from centuries past. And somewhere deep inside, Lara knew that stepping away, if they ever did, would be impossible. The jungle whispered. The ruins waited. And the heat, unrelenting, wrapped around them, demanding surrender. The ruins had grown oppressive, the air thick with humidity and the scent of damp stone, moss, and wild growth. Every step Lara took was measured, careful, but her focus kept drifting not to the precarious footing, not to the intricate carvings around her, but to Marco. His presence pressed against her awareness like heat against skin, impossible to ignore, impossible to resist. They entered a chamber whose ceiling had almost entirely collapsed, allowing sunlight to pour in like golden rivers. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, and Lara's eyes roamed over the walls. The carvings here were different, more explicit, more intimate. Figures entwined in passion, their expressions frozen in ecstasy, their hands reaching and grasping in ways that mirrored the subtle tension between her and Marco. Her fingers brushed against a stone figure, tracing the lines as if seeking some connection across time. Marco crouched beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Every brush of his hand against hers, every slight movement, sent tremors of anticipation through her. "Careful," he murmured, his lips dangerously near her ear. "Some stones here don't forgive mistakes." She shivered not from fear, but from the low, seductive tone of his voice. "I can handle myself," she whispered, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. He chuckled softly, a sound that vibrated in the humid air and wrapped around her like a forbidden promise. His hand grazed her arm as he rose to his feet, guiding her along the uneven floor. The motion was subtle, almost incidental, but Lara felt it down to her bones. She wanted to pull back, to regain control, yet the heat of proximity, the silent pull between them, made stepping away impossible. They reached a circular platform, the center adorned with a large stone basin. The carvings on its rim depicted figures locked in eternal embrace. Lara crouched, running her fingers along the intricate lines, feeling the cold stone beneath her touch. Marco knelt beside her, shoulder brushing hers, hand tracing the carvings in tandem. Their fingers met, lingering, pressing lightly. The contact was electric, sparking a slow, smoldering fire that ran through her veins. "Some things," Marco said, his voice low, almost a growl, "aren't meant to be observed from a distance." Her breath hitched. The words, combined with the nearness of him, the jungle pressing against the ruins like a living wall, made the heat between them nearly unbearable. She looked up at him, heart racing, pulse thundering in her ears. His gaze locked on hers, dark, intense, unyielding. The air around them seemed to vibrate, charged with anticipation. Without thinking, her hand moved, brushing against his. The touch was tentative, electric, and he responded immediately, intertwining his fingers with hers. The contact was slow, deliberate, teasing, as though testing boundaries that neither dared to speak aloud. A gust of wind whispered through the broken ceiling, rustling the vines and leaves outside, sending shadows flickering across the walls. Lara felt the heat of the moment rise, the tension stretching taut between them like a live wire. Every instinct in her body screamed to close the distance, to surrender to the unspoken, irresistible pull. Marco leaned closer, and she could feel his breath against her cheek. "Lara," he murmured, the single word carrying weight, promise, and danger. Her heart skipped, and she felt the undeniable thrill of standing on the edge of something both exhilarating and forbidden. Their hands tightened, their bodies almost touching, each movement charged with intent. The ruins themselves seemed to hold their breath, the carvings of centuries past casting shadows that danced like specters of desire. Lara's pulse raced, every nerve ending was alive, every sense heightened by the heat, by the danger, by the raw, unspoken tension that wrapped around them. The water in the basin rippled faintly as if responding to their presence, reflecting the sunlit chamber in shimmering, distorted images. Lara traced the edges of the stone, feeling the grooves beneath her fingertips, while Marco's hand remained close, warm, tethering her to this moment, this heat, this undeniable pull between them. A tremor ran through the floor, a subtle, almost imperceptible shake, but enough to send a shiver through Lara's body. She grabbed Marco's arm instinctively, and their eyes met. In that moment, the world outside the ruins ceased to exist. There was only them, the heat, the shadows, the slow burning fire of desire that refused to be denied. Some passions, once awakened, demanded surrender. The jungle waited. The ruins watched. And somewhere deep inside, Lara knew that giving in or resisting was no longer a choice she could control. The chamber seemed to breathe with them, a living space of stone and shadow that amplified every heartbeat, every subtle movement. The humidity clung to their skin, pressing them together in ways that made the world outside, sunlight, sky, civilization, fade into irrelevance. Lara felt every brush of Marco's shoulder, every shift of his weight, as if the ruins themselves had made him a part of her senses, inseparable from the heat of the moment. She knelt beside the ancient basin, tracing the carved figures with her fingers, marveling at the intimacy captured in stone. The grooves beneath her fingertips were rough, cold, but they radiated a story of passion that seemed alive. Marco crouched beside her, close enough that she felt the warmth of his body, the subtle rhythm of his breathing. Their knees brushed, and Lara's pulse stuttered, a fiery thrill racing through her veins. "Look at this," Marco murmured, his voice low, a dangerous undertone threading each word. He pointed to a carving depicting two figures entwined in a secretive ritual. His finger hovered just above hers, a teasing proximity that sent shivers through her. "These ruins, they're older than anyone could imagine. And some of what's hidden here, some of it is forbidden." Lara swallowed hard, aware of the charged energy crackling between them. "Forbidden," she echoed, voice husky, betraying the tension that wrapped around her like a second skin. He didn't answer with words. Instead, his hand moved, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead, fingers lingering near her temple. The contact was subtle but deliberate, a silent acknowledgement of the fire simmering between them. Lara's breath hitched, and she felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by an instinct that refused caution. The basin water rippled under their movements, catching the shafts of sunlight that filtered through the collapsed ceiling. Lara reached out, tracing the water's edge, and Marco's hand met hers, fingers entwining. The contact was intimate, slow, deliberate, a spark igniting a slow burn of desire neither could deny. "We shouldn't," she began, but the words faltered. Her own voice seemed distant, drowned out by the pounding of her heart and the heat that pressed against her senses. "Shouldn't what?" he murmured, his lips dangerously close to her ear, warm against her skin. The low growl in his tone made her knees weak. The ruins themselves seemed to respond. Tiny tremors ran through the stone floor, subtle vibrations that made her shiver. Every instinct screamed danger, yet there was a thrill in it, a delicious tension that drew her closer to him, closer to the fire neither had named but both felt. Marco leaned in, his hand brushing the small of her back, guiding her gently but insistently toward him. Lara's breath caught as their faces were inches apart, the heat between them tangible, almost suffocating. She could feel the pull of his body, the magnetic force that had grown since the moment they first entered the ruins, intensified by the jungle pressing in around them. "Lara," his voice was low, almost a growl, carrying a weight she couldn't resist. She could feel his heartbeat against hers, steady and strong, a tether anchoring her in the intensity of the moment. She reached up, brushing her fingers along his jaw, tracing the sharp lines of his face. The touch was electric, and he responded immediately, leaning closer, a slow, deliberate movement that left no doubt of the fire between them. Their eyes locked, dark, intense, full of unspoken promises. The ancient carvings seemed to echo their own tension, the figures frozen in stone yet alive with motion, passion, and secret knowledge. Lara could feel it, the pulse of history, the weight of desire carried across centuries, pressing down on them, urging them to surrender to the heat. A sudden gust of wind swept through the chamber, rustling the vines and leaves that crept through broken stones. The shadows danced across their bodies, exaggerating every curve, every movement, every inch of closeness that neither could ignore. Lara's breath hitched, and she felt a shiver run through her spine, a delicious anticipation that matched the storm building inside her. Marco's hand tightened around hers, fingers intertwining as if claiming a space that had existed only in their shared tension. "Some flames," he whispered, voice low, "once lit, can't be put out." Lara's lips parted, her gaze locking with his. In that instant, the world contracted to the ruins, to the jungle outside, and to the slow-burning fire that demanded acknowledgement. They were on the edge of something unstoppable, dangerous, irresistible, a convergence of heat, history, and desire that would consume them if they let it. The ruins waited. The jungle hummed. And Lara knew, deep in her bones, that there was no turning back from what had already begun. The air had become almost unbearable, thick with humidity and the heat of the midday sun streaming through the gaps in the collapsed roof. Lara could feel the sweat clinging to her skin, but it wasn't just the weather, it was the charged energy radiating between her and Marco, a tension that had been building since the moment they stepped into the ruins. Every brush of his hand, every fleeting touch, had ignited a fire neither could deny. They moved cautiously across the uneven stone floor, the ruins themselves groaning beneath their weight, echoing the thrum of anticipation that pulsed between them. The jungle outside pressed against the broken walls, its relentless heat and dense greenery amplifying the intimacy of the moment. It was as if the world beyond these ancient stones no longer existed. The final chamber unfolded before them like a hidden sanctuary. Moss-draped pillars rose from the floor, their tops disappearing into shadow. In the center stood a raised platform, carved with patterns that seemed to shimmer in the golden light. Lara approached it, mesmerized by the intricate symbols, feeling the grooves beneath her fingers as if they carried a pulse of their own. Marco followed closely, his presence grounding and igniting her all at once. "This is it," he murmured, his voice low, reverent. "The heart of the ruins. It's alive." Lara felt a shiver run through her. "Alive, and dangerous," she replied, though her words trembled, betraying the magnetic pull she felt toward him. He stepped closer, the heat of his body brushing against hers. Every instinct screamed at her to pull back, to resist, but the tension was overwhelming, a force as real as the stone beneath their feet. Marco's hand found hers, fingers interlacing, and the spark between them ignited into a slow, consuming flame. The chamber seemed to respond to their presence. A faint tremor ran through the platform, a subtle vibration that sent a shiver through Lara's body. The carvings on the stones twisted in the shifting light, the figures appearing almost alive, frozen in moments of passion and ritual. She could feel history pressing down, centuries of desire captured in stone, and it mirrored the undeniable heat between them. Marco leaned closer, his lips brushing her temple. "Lara, can you feel it?" His voice was a whisper, husky, intimate, resonating with the heat that wrapped around them both. She swallowed, her heartbeat hammering in her chest. "Yes," she breathed. "It's overwhelming." Their eyes locked, dark and intense, and the distance between them dissolved. Every touch, every glance, every small movement became charged with intention. Lara's hands found his chest, feeling the hard lines beneath his shirt, while Marco's arms encircled her, drawing her impossibly close. The ruins, ancient and knowing, seemed to hold them in a cocoon of heat and shadows, amplifying every sensation. A sudden gust of wind swept through the broken chamber, carrying the scent of wet earth and wild flowers. The vines trembled, casting flickering shadows across their skin. Lara's breath hitched as Marco's lips brushed hers, tentative at first, then insistent. The kiss was electric, igniting the fire that had been simmering between them for days. She pressed closer, their bodies molding together, every nerve ending alive with sensation. The ruins echoed with the sound of their breaths, the faint drip of water, and the whisper of leaves outside. Time ceased to exist. There was only heat, desire, and the relentless pulse of the jungle around them. Marco pulled back slightly, his forehead resting against hers. "Some flames," he murmured, voice rough with need, once ignited, can't be contained. Lara smiled, breathless, her fingers tangled in his hair. Then let them burn, she whispered. They explored the chamber, tracing the carvings, discovering hidden alcoves and narrow stairways that led deeper into the heart of the ruins. Every step, every brush of skin, intensified the heat between them. Danger and desire intertwined, the ancient stones seemed to whisper encouragement, urging them to surrender fully to the fire that had taken hold. As the sun began to sink, golden light spilled across the chamber, illuminating their entwined forms. The jungle outside glowed in the fading light, the ruins alive with shadows and secrets. Lara and Marco paused on the raised platform, bodies close, hearts racing, their connection a living, breathing thing in the ancient space. And there, in the heart of the jungle ruins, the fire that had been building for days between the heat, the danger, the secrets, and the unspoken longing finally reached its peak. They stood together, bound by desire, history, and the thrill of the unknown, knowing that some passions, once awakened, could never be forgotten. The jungle whispered, the ruins held their breath, and the heat of the day finally gave way to the burning fire of what had begun and what would never end.